evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Here in the United States, we've been so deeply engrossed in our own debates over whether men should be allowed to compete on girls' swim teams or whether it's immoral to carry our groceries in plastic bags that we have missed the fact that the government of China has been busy with its own agenda, taking over the world. In the space of just 15 years, for example, the Chinese have succeeded in recolonizing the entire continent of Africa. Didn't think that could happen? Well, it is happening. In Africa, China now calls the shots and takes the natural resources for itself, period. As of tonight, there is only one remaining African country that dares to recognize Taiwan, and it happens to be among the smallest countries in Africa, Swaziland. Everyone else on the continent obeys Beijing. But wait a second, how can this be happening? Isn't colonialism racist and bad? Yes, it is. And no one's worse and more racist than the Chinese. Go on Chinese social media sometime and see how they describe the Africans they've subjugated. It's horrifying. So why isn't the New York Times writing stories about any of this? You know why. Because the New York Times is on China's side. That's why they all but ignore the brutal Chinese colonization of Latin America, which is also in full swing right now. Colonialism violates everything the New York Times once claimed to believe in, but that's okay because they never really believed any of it anyway. It was always about power. We came to Brazil this week to see for ourselves what the Chinese are doing to Latin America. We're making a documentary about it for our Tucker Carlson original series. Brazil has the last pro-American government in Latin America. It's our single most important ally in the Western Hemisphere. Allowing Brazil to become a colony of China would be a significant blow to us and potentially a very serious military threat. The Biden administration appears to be in favor of it. One person who's emphatically not in favor of it is the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. So, of course, the American media hate him. Here's some of their slander.
The United States isn't the only country lurching dangerously towards authoritarianism. It is happening all over, indeed. Just yesterday, for example, Brazilians elected Jair Bolsonaro.
Usually you don't get rid of an aspiring dictator through the electoral process. Brazil is going to have trouble with Bolsonaro.
It's that same authoritarian, like women-hating, racist energy. He's the Trump of Brazil.
President Bolsonaro doesn't believe in social distancing, doesn't want lockdowns, much more extreme than President Trump.
Brazil's far-right nationalist president Jair Bolsonaro spoke at an event in Dallas. These two men and fellow travelers like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin represent the growing global threat to the ideas of liberalism.
These are people whose research consists of 3 minutes on Wikipedia on the way to the studio. He's a racist! Of course he is. He, quote, doesn't want lockdowns. There's your proof. But it is the last clip from plagiarist Fareed Zakaria that explains why they're so mad at Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro, Fareed Zakaria tells us, represents a, quote, growing global threat to the ideas of liberalism. Liberalism, meaning neoliberalism, meaning globalism. And in fact, that is true. Bolsonaro is no Justin Trudeau. He's not a low-IQ fascist who would be working as an Instagram influencer if he doesn't have his own army. He's not the president of Ukraine, who shuts down television stations that dare to criticize him and outlaws opposition parties and arms Nazis. In conventional terms, Bolsonaro is, in fact, liberal. He has done nothing to stop civil liberties in Brazil. But at the same time, he is a nationalist. He cares about his country. He resists China. Therefore, he must be stopped. George Soros hates him, and so does Joe Biden. He's not with the program. So naturally, we wanted to meet him. Yesterday, we did. We sat with Bolsonaro for more than an hour. And the first thing we learned is that the left in Brazil hates him very much. They tried to kill him when he first ran for president 4 years ago. With very little money and the backing of no party, he came out of nowhere to get 57 million votes. But he almost didn't survive to be elected. He was stabbed by a leftist almost to death at a rally, at which point the left funded lawyers to come in and rescue his attempted murderer. An amazing story that hasn't gotten a ton of coverage in the United States. He's an authoritarian, says MSNBC. All right. So we asked Bolsonaro about the stabbing in our conversation. We also asked him about his Christian faith, which is on display, something else that triggers them. We asked him about our Supreme Court stance on abortion, his views on gun rights. And we asked him, fundamentally, why do you think you're so hated? Here's the first part of the conversation.
The parallels between politics in Brazil and politics in the United States are striking to an American.
you are opposed by a coalition of billionaires, college professors, and CNN. Tell us what the opposition wants. What will Brazil look like if your opponent wins, do you think?
A minha eleição foi quase milagre.
My election itself was almost a miracle. I had nothing going for me to be elected. I was just, say, an isolated member of Congress, known as the lower segment of National Congress in Brazil. I conducted my campaign anchored on a biblical passage, John 3:32. Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. The media never gave me any visibility or space. Much to the contrary. They attacked me all the time throughout the campaign. On September the 6th, 2018, the eve of the election, I suffered an attempted assassination.
The far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro was being carried through a crowd. You can see him there on the shoulders of some supporters when suddenly a man with a knife stabs him in the abdomen.
Doctors say my survival was a miracle, and the same is true for my election. And a very important factor, which you may perhaps not be aware of, is the fact that Brazil had a country that, upon taking office as president, the incumbent president surrendered strategic positions in the cabinet political parties, including the cabinet ministries, state banks, state companies. I did not do that. So I got a lot of pushback, strong pushback from Brazilian parliament, and we were able to withstand. In 2019, in 2020, of course, the pandemic hit and everything changed. And this country was doomed to a fiasco because many governors actually gathered forces through the economy to defeat me. We were able to successfully come to the end of 2020, 2021, and came to a positive balance of about 3 million new job posts created in Brazil during the pandemic. And we're now in the last year of my current term in office, and the left wing is really going desperate, because despite everything, you know, we're doing pretty well. Now, the problems in Brazil are the problems that are there for the whole world, such as, for example, inflation as a result of mistake, and policies adopted during the pandemic such as stay-at-home, and the economy will take care of itself later. The lockdown policies, as well as the war between Ukraine and Russia, which has partly, of course, affected the price of fuels, which in turn, of course, reflects in higher inflation levels. The left wing uses that tries to use that to defeat me. If they do come back to power, in my view, they will never go back or go out of power again. Even former President Lula, I mean, everything he says, despite all the foolish things he says, and despite attacking so many people, such as Christians, for example, when it comes to the issues such as abortion policy and the apparent partnership he has with many crooks and thieves, he wants many crimes to no longer be crimes. And he wants to be able to lend money to dictatorships all around the world. He wants to disarm the good, willing population. They also want to revitalize the MST, the Landless People Movement, and arm them. I mean, they should have no less or no more than 10% of votes, but they do. The opinion polls conducted by Data Following, one of the last polls indicated that Lula is perceived as being more honest than I am. I mean, this kind of opinion poll, of course, is totally mistaken and doesn't work, but they do conduct these polls to attach some element of credibility to potential future manipulation of votes. That's a suspicion we clearly have. That's actually more than a suspicion. We have some circumstantial evidence, and if the left wing does come back to power, in my view, they'll never leave power anymore. And this country will follow the same pathways as Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, Colombia. Brazil will be one more wagon in that train. And the losers will be the Brazilian population, and also the left wing itself. I mean, the left-wing voter will lose as a result, and all of South America will be colored red, if you understand me. And in my view, the United States will become virtually an isolated country in the world.
So many questions, but back to the stabbing during your campaign. You were stabbed by a leftist at a campaign event. He was never sent to prison. He went to a mental hospital. Did you think you were going to die?
The doctors in the city where I underwent the surgery, and also the following day in Sao Paulo, the capital, they said out of 100 people who were stabbed like I was, only one person survives. And thank God I survived. And also due to my physical preparation, also because of the healthy lifestyle I had throughout my life, So that helped me resist. And as a coincidence, on the eve, the day before, I had taken a shot of benzidine, a drug that helped fight a more serious, or what would otherwise be a more serious infection because the knife was infected. And the person who stabbed me was affiliated with the left-wing party PSOL. The following day after the stabbing, 3 renowned lawyers came to the town Ruiz de Fora to try to defend the person. And the person who stabbed me, Adalia, on the same day, September the 6th, someone tried to go into the House of Representatives using false documentation, which could serve as an alibi if he had fled the crime scene in Juiz de Fora. So someone tried to use his documents to go into the House of Representatives as an alibi. No one can possibly explain to me why the investigation has not evolved with so many elements available.
The media in Brazil is highly concentrated. 90% of all ad dollars go to a company called Globo, which dominates television here. They're opposed to you. How did you win? How could you win again with the entire Brazilian media against you?
Existe o peso da imprensa contra mim.
Yes, there is the weight of the media against me. True, but social media has been doing a great job in Brazil. My social media channels are among the most interactive in the world. And I believe that today we have about 40% of the population who has not yet expressed their voting intentions, and most of the voters, we believe, will vote for me during the elections.
Why is there no Fox News in Brazil? CNN is here. You got over 50 million votes in the last election. CNN's a political player here, so is Globo, but there's no TV channel for your voters?
Well, if I could, launch an appeal to you, I can only say that you will be the most welcome in Brazil. You will be an excellent counterpart to the other vehicles or outlets. There are very few media outlets that are really unbiased in Brazil. That's something we need. And we do have one program in the Jovem Pan network called The Dots in the Eyes. The Dots in the Eyes, or The Dots on the Eyes, and they're excellent. They really showcase the good things going on in this country.
So you find yourself in a place where the permanent bureaucracy here in Brasilia, the state-owned companies, the media, leaders in countries around Brazil are all opposed to you. You stand effectively alone. Are you bothered by that, or how do you...
Brazil is an economic powerhouse in South America. The 10 countries with which we have political, geopolitical, physical borders are not that economically strong as compared to Brazil. We are what you might describe as a cherry on the cake. If Brazil goes down or collapses, the whole of South America will go down and be colored red, if you understand me. And it will certainly, of course, be a country aligned with other ideologies outside of Brazil. And it will establish a wonderful bloc, wonderful between quotation marks, and they will be able to impose their will on the world. Brazil remains a democracy, but we do run a serious risk of collapsing.